Knight Destrier. The new Imperial Knight is here and I'm going to make a video on it for you guys today. This wouldn't be possible if it wasn't for Underworld Gaming, the awesome independent hobbyist that have decided to sponsor this video. They have very kindly sent out the new Knight for me to build and paint for you guys. Not only that, they've also sponsored the channel for the Patreon giveaway this month. So if you want to be in with a chance of winning this Eldar box set, all you need to do is be signed up to the Patreon at any tier, which I think is pretty cool. So the whole purpose of today's video is to get this entire Knight done in a single day, in kind of a couple of hours really. And setting yourself up for success when it comes to doing a Knight. A Knight is quite a large scale project, and there's a couple of tips and tricks for you guys to make life a lot easier and to basically be able to get the whole Knight done. I basically have been working on Knights for a long time. I've got Knights everywhere and I've never played a game with Knights. So with this guy, a couple more Lancers, my Porphyrian, and one more Knight, I'll have a full 2,000 point army going into 11th edition. I'm quite excited to get that on the table and give Knights a try for the first time. So depending on how this guy turns out, hopefully it's well. Anyway, without further ado, let's dive in and get this Knight done. Okay, so the whole purpose of today's video is to find out how hard it is to paint a Knight and how quickly we can paint a Knight to a fairly nice standard. So the first trick is to always subassemble your Knights. I am not a big fan of subassembly. I do it very rarely on very kind of few projects, but on Knight, you have to subassemble. So you basically have the main frame of the Knight, which will all be done in the kind of silver metallics and stuff like that. And then you have all of the armor panels as separate pieces. This is made even easier on the new Knight because that whole top panel can come off like that. On the other Knights, that's not happening, so you have to put on at least a top panel. As you can see, I've got all the armor panels separate, all cut out, all cleaned up. There's not that many of them actually on this like medium-sized Knight. And then I like to stick them all to painting handles. People always ask me what I'm doing here. It's just cuts off bits of sprue that I've cut down to size and, you know, angles, and then a little bit of super glue to hold them in place. And I do that with every single piece, all the armor panels, so that I can, you know, spray them, undercoat, and then I can also airbrush them up later on without having to touch the pieces. Okay, and with all of the pieces fully connected, it's now time to get them sprayed. So I just sprayed all of the armor pieces black, nice matte black, and the main body of the Titan and the weapons got a coat of silver over the top of that. The way I do that with the body, I think it always looks great. A solid coat of black and then like a heavy zenithal of the silver, and you get this really lovely color here. And I think it's the perfect base coat for like the exoskeleton or whatever of a Knight Titan. From there, you can just build that color up super simple with a couple of washes and painting the cabling. And then you don't have to do very much else with it because all the armor panels is where people's focus are going to go. But anyway, I got some black tone and I put that through the airbrush and gave the entire body a nice coat of that just to darken down some of the recesses and make it ready for some dry brushing a little bit later on. I wanted to start with a nice matte coat, so I did go with some matte surface primer with an airbrush, and I knocked that all over the armor panels again. Now at this stage, I wasn't 100% sure as to which panels I was going to do the black, which ones I was going to do the red, which ones I was going to do the cream, which are the three main colors that are across my Black Templar, and of course across my Templar Knight House, which I know is a strange thing, but leave me alone. I have a story in my head that makes sense for me, and I'm going to continue adding Knights to my Templar Knight House unapologetically. Now, I know the black background and then a black piece on front of it is kind of hard to see, so I do apologize for that if it's not as clear. But as you can see, I'm just going in and neatening up all those panels. There was a little bit of overspray in the silver, so you can see all that speckledy silver bits. So you have to, of course, cover all of that up. But once that black coat was fully secured, obviously it was time to then start kind of bumping up those colors. So we're going to go for like 2 stages of airbrushing on all of the black, and then we're going to move on and tape all the bits off and go for kind of reds and creams. Obviously I was on a time constraint. I wanted to paint this Knight in under 5 hours, which is a kind of a crazy thing to think about. Can you get an entire Knight done in under 5 hours? So basically the order of operation had to shift. I wanted to dry brush up all the silver, giving us this really nice coat, because I had to throw the texture paste on the base to give that time to dry whilst I was airbrushing up and working up all the other panels, so that by the time I got to the end, I could then just dry brush up the base, neaten up the trim, and kind of move along. It's always been the bane of my existence where I've gotten to the end of a paint job and then I've had to throw textured paste on a base and wait hours for it to dry. So I wanted to get this on nice and early in the day. So I got a nice solid coat of Firelands from AK Interactive on top of that. Super simple, but super nice. You can hit a little bit at the bottom of the feed and stuff like that. Make sure you get it all under the feed if you're doing texture paste. You don't want to see any old silver base showing through when you're doing up at night. So this knight is actually a very, very enjoyable size. A lot of people were questioning what size this thing is. They're very curious on the comparison of it next to the kind of standard knights. And it is obviously a lot smaller. It's not a lot shorter. It's only maybe an inch shorter, if that. But it's a lot less bulky. Its legs are a lot smaller. It doesn't have such big shoulder pads. It's like big carapace armor is a lot smaller. So it's definitely a much more dainty knight. And that's very cool. Using some masking tape, I covered off the different panels that I wanted different colors. And then I kind of got to work. So you can see I'm going very slow and I'm using very thin coats to build up that kind of bone color that I use for my Templars. I know Templars are meant to have white, but I prefer the kind of bone color that I go for. I think it sits next to the black a lot nicer. And aesthetically speaking, I think it just looks nicer. The real stark, dark black and then the really white, it just doesn't do it for me. It just kind of jumps out as just being kind of ugly. Whereas I love this. It's a really soft color. And I don't think it doesn't sell as a Templar thing when you get to the end. You can see at the very end, I'll ask the question again. You maybe can answer in the comments whether or not you think it looks like a Templar knight or whether it looks weird because it's not white. It was then time to, of course, move on to the red panels that I had marked off. While I'm doing this, I just want to take a chance to thank everyone out there for continuing to support the channels that I have over here. Obviously, the main channel, Mediocre Hobbies, where I post most 40k kind of kill team stuff. I have Old World Wednesdays, which guess what's on Wednesdays and guess what I feature? The Old World. And then I have Middle Earth Mondays, which is on Mondays, and I focus on Middle Earth. Those are my two kind of side games that I love the most and I want to spend a little bit of time on. So they have their own dedicated channels. If you didn't know that, please do go and check them out. Subscribe to those and check out some of the videos. So anyone out there that likes those videos, watches all the content, likes, comments, subscribes, you guys are amazing. Thank you so much. And anyone out there goes the extra step and supports over on Patreon, you guys literally keep the lights on, the cameras rolling. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for that. As you guys know, there's a whole host of different benefits for being involved with a Patreon. You get extra videos, you get access to podcasts, you get access to a private Discord server, there's painting competitions, community showcases, and all around good vibes. And then of course we are doing the giveaway, the thing I showed off at the start of this video, the Eldar Raider Host box set, which contains all the new Eldar units, is going to be given away to one lucky patron at the end of this month. So we do a giveaway that scale every single month. So if that's something that interests you, please do check it out. Okay, the only thing I couldn't really properly mask off for the red was the cannon arm. It would have just taken more time to tape it off than it would be to just go in with an actual brush and just paint in those parts. So the basically casing of the cannon and then the round bit that goes around the kind of mid section of the barrel, we're going to do that in a red coat. The same ones we used for the airbrushing, the mid-tone and the highlight, which from Mephiston and then into Evil Suns. And then we're going to quickly layer those up as well. This will make kind of a big difference later on. It was the arm would have been far too silver if we hadn't bothered doing that. I do very much enjoy a knight project, and anyone out there who kind of likes doing some one-off projects, a knight is a great one to do because you can take free blades, which are basically mercenary knights, and you can just own one knight and ally that in with other armies. I know the ally matrix is a bit messed up these days. Hopefully in 11th edition it'll become a little bit more clear and we can then once again field free blades in with other Imperial forces. And there's nothing kind of cooler than, you know, a beleaguered guard regiment on the brink of breaking and being overrun by something horrific and then calling in support on a Knight Titan stomping up over the horizon or from around behind a building and then laying waste to the enemy. It's just such a cool like image thing. Hopefully we can get that back again. But as a project, it's so fun. I know it's expensive. It's not something you're going to throw some money away on just for a bit of painting. But if you do manage to get your hands on a knight, don't just leave it gathering dust under the bed. Crack it out, get it built, get some paint on it. I promise by the end of it, you'll be sad about it. You'll just be really proud of yourself for getting a knight done. I don't even know how many knights I've done now. I think I'm up to about 8 or 9 knights fully painted. This is, of course, the slowest part of doing a knight, which is the gold trim. And this is where I truly noticed that this is a much smaller knight than the kind of standard one. Because I swear to God, to paint the trim in on a standard one would take nearly an hour, and this took maybe 20 minutes. So there's a lot less gold trim on it, which was, I'm so thankful for that. But as you can see, all the different airbrushing and the metallics, even on this faceplate here, really sold it. Really like paid off. You've got the black, you've got the cream, you've got the red. That kind of heraldic knight look looks amazing across a knight. I'm so happy with it. And then, of course, the chain blade. I did look in at the lance as an option, but for a Templar force, I prefer having the armor panels on the actual close combat weapon, so I can add them in all that red coloring, because all my Templar weapons have red casings on them, all the chainswords and bolters. So this just once again helps it tie in with the force. Bit of black contrast paint for all of the cables, and you literally do have to go and hunt down all of the cables and soft seals in the joints, which connect all kind of legs and torsos, or sorry, legs and arms to the torso. We then shade down all those metallics. I usually use a nice Reikland flesh shade. It adds a bit of warmth to it all. And then we'll do some very quick layering of that later on with some kind of cheating and cheeky dry brushing. But it's at this stage now where every part is kind of painted. Everything is looking neat and tidy. And before we start kind of weathering down, adding any chipping or any weathering powder or anything like that, it's time to add in the transfers. I'm a huge advocate for transfers. I will never not be a gigantic advocate for transfers. Anyone out there that speaks poorly about transfers is just wrong. You're just wrong. You just don't know how to use them properly. But if you learn how to use transfers correctly, you will end up with stunning results across all your miniatures for kind of low effort. But yeah, I often go overboard. I add in like 10, 12 transfers onto pretty much everything. Here's the tiny tilt shield, which will get 4 transfers on it because why not? You can see me manipulating this kind of text scroll around into the right position, getting it sealed in. If you want to know how I do transfers, I've got a whole video on doing transfers. It's definitely worth a watch if it's something that you're interested in, because it does make a huge difference to a model. Now, with all the transfers in place and secured 100%, it's time to layer up the gold. And all I do is grab a little bit of lead belcher silver, a nice flat dry brush, and I dry brush up all the silver, making sure that I go overboard and I hit all that black, all the red, all the cream. I'm just adding a light silver dry brush across every single panel. This will obviously catch all the sharp edges, all the rivets, and any bits of line work and stuff like that. It makes all the gold pop. And it takes about 10 seconds. You could spend 2 hours edge highlighting all the gold and, you know, adding in all the, it's a waste of time. Even this bit, which has no gold, you can see me adding a little bit of silver dry brushing, and it's just adding nice bits of scratch work and weathering. This is a Night Titan. This stomps through war zones, crashes its way through hab buildings, has innumerable amounts of small arms fire pattering off it constantly in a war zone. No piece of paint is going to be perfect. It's all going to be chipped and damaged and worn down. Okay, I took a little bit of time to paint up the eyes. I did a really nice job, a nice kind of mid-tone green, a highlight green, then inside of that, a little bit of dot of white in the top left corner. Glazed them and they look really nice, and then I put a face mask over the top and you can't see them at all. Bit of a pain. But I did paint up the top hatch window in the same color and it looks really nice. There's a little bit of scroll work on the chest to make sure to get that done. These are just the kind of small kind of finishing details. I think the only thing I didn't really 100% finish is the banner. It's painted, it's airbrushed up with the same cream tones that you can see in front of you right now. But I think it needs some transfers and some weathering and stuff. I very much left it alone, although I have glued it into place. Hopefully you can see here how nice that silver dry brush catches those edges and makes those sections kind of stand out and look really, really nice. Obviously this is all the individual panels. And it is now time to do the kind of final assembly of the knight, which involves just snapping all those pieces off of the painting handle. You can see how quickly they just pop off with super glue. Sometimes a little bit of super glue residue can be left, but that's why there's a knife in my hand currently. I just scrape those bits off. And when that's all done, we will glue the entire piece together before we do our final layer of kind of weathering on it. Decided to remove these pins so I can position these arms in a much more kind of, I don't know, cooler position. I use super glue to add all these extra panels on because there's paint on paint. Plastic glue won't dissolve through the paint to give you a solid bond, so don't try and use plastic glue. Super glue is the way to go for this. Here is the knight fully assembled. All we're waiting to do now is add in the final step, which is weathering powder. I love weathering powder. Now, if you like the clean, pristine look of the knight that you're seeing right here, all you need to do is go away and give it a nice coat of a varnish to secure those transfers in place fully and protect the paint job across the entire knight. But I'm going to put on some weathering powder first, and then I'm going to do the varnish. So I like to work around all the panels, recesses, grooves. Like I said, this thing is in the middle of a war zone with explosions going off all around it. There's going to be plenty of weathering powder kind of stuck in all the recesses and raining down on the hull. And I think it just looks a lot more kind of worn, torn, and awesome. Now, initially, this will look really bright and vibrant and almost look a little bit too much. But once you hit it with that spray varnish, as you can see here, it does all that powder work down. And we are left with this. The first painted new knight, painted in sub 5 hours. This actually only took 4 hours and 37 minutes to go from grey plastic to a fully painted knight. I'm super proud of this result. And I think with the techniques and stuff that I've shown you in today's video, you can also achieve the same thing. Please do let me know what you think of this knight. And let me know if you want to see any more knight videos in the near future. I still have things like a Castellan and another Lancer and a few other knights to do. And I'd be more than happy to do videos on them if you guys would like to see that. Thank you guys so much for sticking around to the end. I'll see you in the next one.